What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Fall Obsession podcast. I am Sam, your show host over here at Fall Obsession, and appreciate you guys tuning in for another week's episode. We're back on the podcasting train. It feels good to be back in front of a mic every week. I'm glad to be hanging out with you guys. This week, our guest is Tanner Higgins. He is one of our Fall Obsession team members, recently joined our team from Oklahoma, and he just had a pretty incredible, crazy, insane experience with the shooter buck on public land. One of those adventures that just turns into the series of unfortunate events. Seems like it never ends. Thankfully for him, it did end on a positive note, but it's an incredible story and one that he's going to tell on our podcast in this episode. But before we get to the meat of the episode, I got to hit a few things first. Podcast is sponsored by Hoot Camo. I'm rocking the hat if you're watching the podcast video. The guys over here at Hoot Camo, they're a Texas-based company, and they are as down-to-earth and blue-collar as they come. We have really enjoyed getting to know these folks. They make very high-quality camo clothing with their own custom patterns. They've tested their patterns from Texas to Montana and everywhere in between, and they really pride themselves on trying to jump into this industry with the same quality as all of the name brands that you guys know and love, but at a price point that is realistic for the blue collar guys like you and me. So if you have a chance to go check out Hoot Camo, please do so. Look them up on their website. There should be a link in the description on this podcast episode. And be sure that you give them a follow on social media. And if you like what you see, go ahead and order you some. Try it out. We at Fall Obsession wouldn't be using them if we didn't believe in the product. So go check them out and see what you think for yourself. So Hoot Camo, awesome company. We love working with them. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is another podcast partner. Derek and Lacey over there in Mississippi. They book hunts with vetted outfitters across the country. So if you're looking for that next adventure, that once-in-a-lifetime hunt perhaps that you want to book with a vetted and trusted source, give Derek a call. He'll work with you on licensing, location, timeline, pricing, all that good stuff, and help you get squared away with the hunt that's going to serve you well. So Ridge Rock Hunt Company, go check them out. Last but not least, the Outdoor Call radio app is a podcast partner. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV. He has created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day of the week. You'll catch Fall Obsession podcasts streaming on that loop on Mondays, same as our new publications. And he also has a couple different live shows at different points during the week that you can catch on various local stations, and he also shares those broadcasts on his Facebook Live. So the Outdoor Call radio app with Outdoors Dan, go check it out, download the app. If you haven't already, we got another link for that in the episode description. And finally, if you guys have your own outdoor brand or organization that you represent and you are interested in advertising through this podcast segment, please reach out to us. fallobsession.com/podcast is where you guys can go, and that'll put you in contact with myself and our production team, and we can talk numbers and what all that kind of looks like for you to advertise on here. We have a ton of reach coming in, not just through our normal streaming apps, but also through our Carbon TV platform, and we want you guys to be a part of it and to be able to capitalize on that reach as well. So if you're interested in promoting your brand through our podcast, please reach out. We're already excited to have other brands starting to join us, like Hoot Camo, like I just talked about, and it could be you guys too. So fallobsession.com/podcast is where you go. There's a form on there you can fill out. That's it. I'm finally done rambling. Thank you guys for tolerating me. We're getting to the episode now. You're listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down.
Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
All right, everybody, back on here for another Fall Obsession podcast episode. I'm recording this week with one of our new staff members on our Fall Obsession team right here, Mr. Tanner Higgins. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know one thing that and if our listeners recall from previous episodes, one thing that I'm trying to do this year is catch up with as many staff members as I can following some successful hunts, and you, Tanner, you had a successful hunt, and from everything I've been told so far, it was quite the adventure when it was all said and done. That's what it sounds
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, it was a rodeo from the word go. It was definitely a long, arduous adventure.
Yeah. Well, man, I want to get into it with you. I want to give you an avenue here to tell your story and share this adventure with us. But to start off, as I said, this is your first time on our podcast. So start off just telling us kind of where you hunt, just in general. I don't ask anybody to give away specific locations or secrets on here, but give us an idea on what we're looking at as far as where you hunt and kind of your history at that location and your expectations going into the hunting season this year.
So where I was hunting out on this one was a piece of public along a river here in northeast Oklahoma. That's pretty much it's just a small strip of public from the water line of the river to the first private property line that runs I would say it runs probably 30 miles along the river. But it's, like I said, it's just a super narrow strip. And I found this piece about 3 years ago, just looking on maps and doing some e-scouting, get on the Corps of Engineers website and finding maps of what they've got for their public land. And it's right along the top of a levee. And this particular spot's actually got more oak trees on it than any other spot all along the river. Most everything else is, willow, locust, just really lowland, bottom kind of timber. But this spot's got a lot of oaks in it, and so that's kind of what attracted me to it. Plus, it's got a lot of bean fields and cornfields that are on the private side.
Okay.
That kind of drew me to it. So the deer usually they feed on the public at night, and they'll start moving out into the private and stuff during the day, whenever they know people are out there hunting it.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're coming into the season, what were you thinking as far as what your hopes were to see out there as far as whitetail this year in particular, and what were your expectations getting in the stand?
So leading up, I would go out and sit on a county road in August and sit out in my Jeep with my binoculars and just look at the deer that are coming out in the bean fields. Saw a ton of does, a couple small bucks, little 2.5-year-olds. There were 2 older 8 points that really caught my eye that I was really hoping to get on, because they were pretty good size 8 points for this part of the state. I mean, just from my guess from how far away I was, I would say these 8 points had 12 and 14 inch G2s.
Wow.
So, And so my expectation was hopefully I could get on one of those at some point during the season. If not, I know there's a ton of does out there, so there's plenty of opportunities to fill the freezer. So I had a pretty good idea that I was going to see some success. Just was not expecting what actually came out of it.
Yeah. Well, take us into your hunt, man. What kind of hunting? We'll talk about your gear at the end, but what kind of hunting setup are you in? And let's get into the day of here.
So I was in a ladder stand that one of the guys that hunts out there. There's about 6 of us that hunt this particular area, and before this season started, none of us really knew each other. And then as the season started to progress, we started meeting each other and talking to each other at the parking lot. And this guy actually said, "Hey, I've got this ladder stand back in here. If you guys are back in there and I'm not sitting in it, you're more than welcome to use it." I'm not stingy. It's just as long as you leave it better than you found it, I'm good with it. So I sat in it. This was actually my first sit in it this year. The week before, he sat in it, and he shot a buck that a buddy of mine named the Tall Time 10. and actually happened to be the biggest buck of his life from the same stand I shot mine a week before, almost 20 minutes after I had shot mine the week following. So getting everything ready that morning, I go down. I actually got pulled over that morning on my way to go hunt. I actually got pulled over. I went to the corner store to get my normal caffeine, and they were actually closed. So I had to drive 4 miles out of the way to go get some caffeine. And on my way back, I got pulled over because I didn't put my new registration sticker on my tag.
Oh, man.
I had last year's sticker on it, so I didn't put the new one on yet because I hadn't cleaned my plate off. But I had the new sticker in the passenger seat whenever the cop walked up. But I get out there. I was planning on meeting my buddy at 6 o'clock. I met him right at it. Still got out there on time, and it's about a 20-minute walk to get back to where we are because they don't allow any kind of vehicles back in there. You park at the parking lot and you walk back in. And we sat around for about 10 minutes, walked back in there. Legal light was at 6:25 that morning. And I got in the tree right at 6:30, hung my pack up, hung my bow up, grabbed my jacket out of my pack, put my jacket on, reach over and grab my bow. And as soon as I knock an arrow, I hear him grunting and walking to me.
Oh, man. Okay.
So, yeah, I'm not even ready. And I'm like, okay, it's on. There's really nothing I can do at this point. So I didn't have time to stand up. So I'm sitting in this ladder stand, and I can hear him grunting, hear him walking to me. And finally I see him, and it's light enough that I can see it's obviously a buck because he's grunting. I can see some antler, but it's not light enough that I can see all it was. I thought it was a smaller 8-point that we had on camera and I'd seen a couple times out there. Yeah. That, public land in Oklahoma, he's a shooter. He's a 3.5-year-old 8-point. I was going to shoot it.
Yeah, public land, it's kind of a different ball game. You can't be very greedy on public land. So
no, especially around here because it gets hit hard.
Yeah.
Because I live just outside of Tulsa, so there's a lot of guys out here. There's the public around here gets hit hard.
Yeah.
So he comes walking this trail, and he gets to he's at 15 yards, and quartering to me, I grunted at him. He stopped. I shot, and I saw him take off. I could see my arrow sticking out of him as he's running off, and I'm sitting there like, did that really just happen? Like, I haven't even been in the stand 5 minutes, and I've already got an arrow loose.
Yeah.
So I hang my bow up, and I text my buddy. I go, well, that didn't take long. He texts me back, are you serious? I just sat down. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to sit here for probably another hour and a half, see if something else comes walking through. Just don't cut your hunt short because of me.
Yeah.
So I thought I heard it crash about 70 yards away. So I was just going to leave it lay and go after it then.
So when you say you saw your arrow sticking out, how you just could make out the fletchings, or how far was it sticking out? What did you think of your shot placement initially in the stand?
Initially, I thought it was just above halfway up, right on the shoulder blade. I could see about half the arrow sticking out. Okay. So I heard it hit hard bone.
Yeah.
So I figured I either punched through the close shoulder and it was just kind of wedged in there, or I missed the front shoulder and I hit the offside shoulder.
Right.
So my initial thought was I punched through shoulder blade because I could see about half my arrows he was running off.
Gotcha. Okay. But you still really didn't know which buck it was as far as like a buck of the caliber, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, still
gotcha.
didn't. Yeah, I still thought it was because I could see tines as he was running off, but I couldn't count them.
Yeah.
But I sat till about 8 o'clock, and that's whenever I decided to get up and pick up the blood trail. I got to where the shot was. There wasn't any blood. And I figured, being a high shoulder shot with no exit, I know there's not going to be blood for, probably at least the first 30 or 40 yards.
Yeah.
So I just kind of looked around the shot just to see, but I just started going in the direction he took off. And about 30 yards later is when I started finding blood. I would find drops out to the side, and then I would find puddles out in front of where the deer was running. So I figured there was some coming out of the wound, and he was coughing it up.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So looking at it, it was bright red. It had bubbles on it. The stuff that was coming out, there was some that I found. I'm 6'2", and I found blood eye level on trees.
Wow.
So I'm figuring, okay, this is good blood. He's spraying out. He didn't go far.
Yeah.
And I'm tracking him. I actually get to the road that you walk in on, and there was a basketball-sized pool of blood in the middle of the road. And I'm thinking, okay, this deer cannot be far.
Yeah.
And I lose it for a second. I'm kind of go in the direction that he went, don't find anything, turn back around, go a different direction. He'd actually made about a 90-degree turn to his right. Went down in a bowl, crossed the road again, and I tracked him for another 150 yards. So I'm at about 300 yards at this point, 325.
Wow.
And that's when I jumped him the first time.
Dang.
So
before you, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Before you jumped him, going this amount of distance with the blood you're seeing, how are you feeling right now?
Confused.
Yeah.
Because like I said, the blood I was seeing, it was good blood. It's not like I've had a buck before, about 12 years ago, that I lost, that it was just specks.
Yeah.
And this was puddles. I mean, I'm not talking like there's one or two drops here and there. I'm talking like every 10 yards, it looks like you took a 32-ounce cup and just threw it out on the ground.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
confused for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
So you go 300 yards, you bump him, and then what?
At first, I wasn't sure I bumped him because I heard something kind of move around, and I stopped. I sat for a little bit and listened, and then I could see some squirrels that were running up and down a couple trees. So I was thinking, okay, I'm just hearing squirrels. I'm going to keep at it. I go another 10 or 15 yards, and that's when I figured out I bumped him, because that's whenever I saw the flag whenever he jumped up and took off. And so that's when I had realized I had actually jumped him. That's whenever I decided to back out.
Yeah.
And that was I shot him at 6:35. That was at 9 o'clock.
Wow.
That I made the decision to back out and come back. About 6 hours later, I figured I'd back out, come back at 3 o'clock and pick it up again.
Yeah.
So, which is something that buck that I lost 12 years ago, that was a mistake I had made, was I didn't back out. I jumped that deer twice, and I ended up never finding him. I found a bed where he'd pulled up and took off, and I never found any more blood, and I lost that deer because I made the mistake of not backing out. So I learned from that. This time, whenever I found out that I had jumped that buck, I backed out.
Gotcha. So smart decision, first off.
Yeah.
And I would be right there with you, man. Like, you follow a blood trail like that for that far. I have followed far less, not near as far, and found a dead deer. Like, I would be expecting to find my deer anytime. So I'm right there with you on that. So you're backing out. Your plans to come back later in the afternoon. Are you bringing in the cavalry with you, or are you still just one man right now?
So the buddy of mine that went with me in the morning, he said he's going to come back out with me that evening. So now it's two of us, and that's whenever the blood trail started to get it started to peter out a little bit. There was still good blood, it just wasn't as close together.
Yeah.
And so we get back out about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and we start tracking him from where I had jumped him, find blood. We go about 30 or 40 yards. We lose it. It takes us about 20 to 30 minutes to find it again. The buck had actually doubled back and gone around a lay down. And so my wife's looking at me and she's laughing at me.
Recording a podcast over here, nothing to worry about.
Exactly. Yeah, don't mind me.
Hey, sometimes our listeners hear my kids running around the background, so it's all good. We're casual over here at Fall Obsession.
Mine is playing PlayStation in the living room right now.
I know, yeah.
So, but yeah, he had actually doubled back, and we found the blood trail again, and he actually started to go up and over the levee, and we tracked him for another 30 or 40 yards. And at this point, we were tracking pretty dry blood because, like I said, it had been 6 hours since I jumped him. So we're tracking pretty dry blood. Then we start finding stuff that's fresh. And we didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything, but we start finding fresh blood. So we go a little further. We keep finding fresh blood, and we get to a spot where he had bedded down. Found where the leaves were matted down, and there was a pool of blood there. So we found a spot where he had bedded down with fresh blood going away from it. So that was at 4:15, 4:30-ish, about 60, 75 yards away from where I jumped him the first time.
Okay.
So finding that blood and knowing, okay, this deer is probably still alive. Let's just back out and come back tomorrow morning. Because I'm thinking, I'm still seeing the spray up on the trees, and I'm just playing the shot over and over in my head, and I'm watching that deer run off in my head. And like, I know that I hit shoulder. I know I got one lung.
Yeah.
I was pretty sure I got two whenever I shot, but now that we're, 400 yards as a crow flies downriver, and this deer is still alive, okay, I probably only got one. So I'm talking to different buddies. I'm sending pictures of, hey, here's the shot placement. I posted that picture on our page.
Yeah.
Here's the shot placement. And I had one friend of mine give me the news that I didn't want to hear. He's like, man, I've seen plenty of deer survive that hit. And I'm like, I do not want to hear that right now. I'm like, this deer, and he was like, he asked me, he's like, was it broadside? Was it more quarter and two? I said, he was quarter and two. He's like, well, it makes it better. I'm like, okay. He's like, if he's quarter and two, that's probably a dead deer. You're smart to leave him overnight. So that's what we did. And I decided that I was going to come back at 8 o'clock the next morning and pick up the trail again. And that's whenever I was going to call in the cavalry. Yeah. Was whenever we had to let him sit overnight. So, cause I didn't know if he was going to bed down and clot up to where now we're not following blood. Now we might have to call a dog and follow a track. So that was, Saturday night was not a very restful sleep.
I was gonna say, man, that's a sleepless night right there. Not backing out not once but twice, and making that decision. That's a tough one for sure. I know the feeling. Yeah.
So it was definitely not a very restful night's sleep Saturday night. But we got back at it at 8 o'clock. The friend that helped me track it the second time, he wasn't able to come with. But he had been talking to the guy that hung the tree stand and sending him pictures of the blood. He sent him the same picture I sent showing where the shot was. And I get in I start tracking at 8 o'clock. About 8:30, my buddy texts me, says, here's this guy's number. He's coming out to help you. And I'm like, okay, cool. That definitely, he said he might bring his dog. Don't know what's going to happen. So we're just going to go from there and figure it out.
Right.
I kept going, waiting on this guy to show up. At 9 o'clock, still on blood, but now I'm finding fresh blood again.
Really?
Yeah, 15 hours after the shot, I'm
Holy
finding
cow.
fresh blood again. And I'm like, are you serious? I'm like, all right, I'm going to stay put. I'm going to wait for this guy to get here. As I'm waiting on this guy to get there, I look up and here comes a doe at 5 yards. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I don't have an arrow knock. For some reason, I didn't want to walk through as thick of brush as I was walking through without an arrow knock. She walks through at 5 yards, has no idea I'm there.
Really?
I mean, I'm standing on a levee. I've got no back cover. I'm skylined. I'm wearing a black hoodie. It's not like I'm trying to hide myself. And she just walks right on by. I'm like, if I'd have had an arrow knocked, I'd be tracking 2 deer.
Always the times you least expect it, man. Golly.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to sit here and wait for this guy to show up. And at that point, I did knock an arrow.
Yeah.
just in case something's following her. Maybe the buck I shot, maybe a different buck. I don't know, just something. You know, in Oklahoma, we have 2 buck tags.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I sat down and I hear him pull up. I hear him get out of his truck. He starts walking up, and I see him walking through. I kind of holler at him, give him an idea where I'm at. He gets 30 yards away from me. He's got to holler at me because it's so thick he can't see me.
Yeah.
And he's hollering at me. I holler back. And during that exchange, I hear something jump up behind me. And I turn and look, and 30 yards away, I see a silhouette of a rack through a briar thicket. And so I turn back around and tell him, as a, hey, stop. There's a buck right over here at 30 yards. And he's like, well, go see if it's the same one and go shoot it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's turning into a fire drill at this point. Because now this buck knows that I'm here, knows that he's there, but he's just sitting in a briar thicket, and where he's at, he's 5 feet from the water's edge on a 15-foot cliff.
Wow.
And it's a 15-foot bluff bank straight down to the river where he's sitting at. And so I go from, I'm 30 yards away. I sneak around to the back side of him. I get to 15, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, I think this is the same deer. You know, I can see the tines, and he looks hurt. He knows I'm there, and he's not running. So he's acting hurt. He's acting sick. He's acting like there's something wrong. He's not acting like he's healthy and he's about to bolt. He's acting like he's hurting and just doesn't know what to do. And I thought I could see my arrow sticking out of one side. And I'm looking in binoculars, and I see something that looks like the outsert of my arrow, and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is the buck. So I get around to where I've got about a baseball-sized opening, but I can see his back leg, I can see his front leg, I can see his neck, so I can tell how hard he's quartering away from me.
Mm-hmm.
So I settle my pin just in front of his back leg because he's quartering pretty hard. I settle my pin just in front of his back leg and let the second arrow go. I hear the pop. I hear him take off through the briars, and then I hear splash.
Oh,
and I'm like, oh, you have got to be kidding me. And I'm like, don't tell me he just ran into the river. And this guy's like, you're going to want to see this. I'm like, God, don't tell me that. So I'm trying to get to where I can see the river because the briars are so thick. I can't see the water. I'm 20 feet from the water. I can't see it.
Yeah.
So I'm tearing through briars. I'm cut. My legs are cut up. My arms are cut up. I'm bleeding. I had blood coming out of my ear. It looked like I got in a fight with some mad street cats. It was, my bow got caught up in the briars, and it wouldn't go free. So I just left it there and just kept trying to push through. Hat came off. It was a whole ordeal.
Wow.
And I'm asking the guy, can you see him? Because I'm struggling. I still can't get to the water. And he's like, yeah, I see him. He's in the river dead. And I'm like, oh, well, at least he's dead.
Yeah.
I'm like, is he still floating? He's like, yeah. So I finally get around to where he's at, and I look out, and I look through the gap in the trees, and I see my arrow sticking up. I see about 3 inches of the deer's body, and I see about 18 inches of my arrow sticking out of the water. And I'm thinking, oh, great. How am I going to get that?
Yeah.
Because this river's 130 yards wide, and he's 100 yards out there. And come to find out a little later on, that water's 45 degrees. It was 45 degrees above water. That would be a cold swim. So I start calling people that I know in the area that have a boat. I called the buddy that I was hunting with the day before because I know he's got a boat, but his wife was running some errands. He's got the kids, and he couldn't fit all of us in the boat and try to find a deer. I call another couple buddies. They're like, dude, I'm out of town. Boat's not running. Batteries are dead. And I'm like, oh, great. After about 30 minutes of this, the guy up on the bank's like, where's the closest boat ramp? I'm like, it's 2 miles upriver. He's like, how steep is it? I'm like, I don't know. It's boat ramp.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, let's load up in the Phoenix and let's go get him. And I'm thinking, okay, cool. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I just spent the last 30 minutes trying to find a boat, and come to find out you've got 2 of them, but, whatever.
I could have mentioned that a little sooner.
Yeah, that would have been a nice little tidbit of information
Man,
a half hour ago.
What a perspective for this guy, just showing up and immediately this deer pops up and you shoot him again. Did he have a dog with him?
No, he started to, well, he had it with him, and then whenever he got far enough away from me, and whenever I heard the buck, he took the dog back to the truck.
Okay, I got you.
So we wanted to make sure that everything was good there. So whenever I heard and saw the buck, he took the dog back to the truck.
Gotcha.
Because you can't have any legal means of take on you tracking a deer with a dog in Oklahoma.
I gotcha.
So before he even got to me, whenever we saw that the deer was there, because I had my bow stashed away from me whenever he was walking up. And then whenever we saw the deer there, he took the dog back, and that's whenever I went after the buck. So finally, he's like, yeah, I'll go get my buck. He's like, I've got 2. I've got a bass cat and I've got a Phoenix. One of them surely going to run. And so I'm like, okay. I send him the pin for the boat ramp, and we meet at the ramp about 30 minutes later. And I'm thinking, of course, the whole way I'm Googling how long does a dead deer float in water.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out everything.
Yeah, I'm getting all these answers. It's like, well, if it went into the water and was swimming and it died while it was swimming, its lungs are going to be full of water. It's going to float. If it died before it got to the water, it's going to be full of gases. It'll float. And I'm getting like 50-50. It's going to sink or it's going to float. And I'm like, oh, great. This is just keeps getting better.
Yeah.
But we get to the ramp, we launch the boat, and we get downriver, and I marked a pin on Onyx where I had the buck seen in the water, and we get to the area and I don't see anything. And I'm thinking, because from the time the buck went in the water to the time we got there was an hour. And I'm thinking we let it sit too long and it sank.
Yeah.
And I'm looking around, I don't see anything. Well, he goes, I see your arrow. And I look over the bank. There's 3 inches of my arrow sticking up out of the water. I mean, it's just barely, it's not even my whole wrap sticking out of the water.
Wow.
And so we get over to it, and I look down at his depth finder. We're 6 feet from the bank in 30 feet of water.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the Verdigris River is a navigation channel, so they ship barges and stuff like that. So the channel's deep and it's wide. So yeah, we're 6 feet from the bank and we're in 30 foot of water. And I'm like, well, I'm really glad this thing didn't sink, because it's not one of those situations. Yeah, it's in 5 feet of water. I'll jump in and grab it. No, we're in 30. If it sinks, we're gonna hope he's got live scope and a snag and a pole.
Yeah, that's getting to the end if it sinks right there. Wow.
Pretty much. But so I get down, and as I'm going to reach down for it to grab it, I go, this ain't the same buck I shot yesterday. Because I'm thinking I shot an 8-point yesterday. This buck's got 6 on one side. I'm like, this ain't the same buck. And he's like, well, looks like we got another one to track. He's like, let's get it up in here. And so I reached down and I grabbed the rack, and we pull it up into the boat. And as we're pulling it up into the boat, the 6 inches of my other arrow from the day before that I thought I saw when it was bedded was sticking out the other side.
Oh, wow.
So come to find out it was the same buck.
Yeah.
Or else that would have been an even longer day.
Yeah. A new adventure.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
It, 2 arrows and 2 arrows, 16 hours later, and finally had the deer recovered.
Wow. That is crazy.
Or no, not 16 hours. Sorry, 30 hours later.
Yeah, I was going to say it'd be more than a day for sure. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
2 arrows, 30 hours later, finally had the deer recovered.
So what did the first arrow end up hitting? Were you able to find out?
So I actually hit forward of where I thought. I hit in front of the close shoulder, and it actually punched through the offside shoulder, and I caught the top of the offside lung.
Gotcha. Okay.
Caught the top of the offside lung, and it went out the back of the lung.
Gotcha.
And came out the shoulder on the other side.
Wow.
So I did end up hitting one lung, but yeah, the shot was about 4 inches further forward than I thought it was.
Gotcha. And what kind of gear are you using as far as archery equipment? Because I know I'm always curious with various shots and stuff, like what you're running.
So I'm shooting a bear species that's 70 pounds at 28 inches. Mm-hmm. And I'm shooting Vector HMR 300 spine arrows. Okay. With I'm shooting a 50 grain outsert and 150 grain broadhead. So I've got a total arrow weight of about 550 grains. Wow. And I'm one of those guys. I like that heavier setup. Yeah. And I get laughed at a lot because I watch ranch fair videos from guys that like that. They like that light, fast setup, and I'm over here. I've got a 45-pound recurve that's got a 610 grain arrow setup, and I got people laughing at me like, "Dude, why are you shooting them so heavy?" I'm like, "'Cause broomsticks break bones."
Man, I get that. I'm not that heavy, but I run a 440 grain arrow. My kind of more middle ground, I guess you'd say. But I've been that guy that ran that super light stuff before, and it wasn't for me. And I built those 440 grains. They're a 340 spine, but 440 grains is the total arrow weight. And I built that arrow out 8 years ago, and I haven't changed it since. I've gotten countless pass-throughs and stuff. I'm happy with it for sure. But yeah. I appreciate heavy arrows for sure.
Yeah. I've had good luck with heavy arrows. Like I said, my recurve setup, I'm shooting, it's 45-pound recurve. And with that 610, 620 grain arrow, I shot a doe at 17 yards 4 years ago that arrow blew through both shoulders.
That's awesome.
So I definitely like the heavier setup, but for me, it's kind of more where you hunt, because here where I hunt, I'm not going to be taking 50 and 60 yard shots. Right. I'm going to be taking stuff that's up close that I'm not going to have a lot of time to pick a perfect shot, because like I said, this buck came in from the time I first heard him until I shot was 45 seconds to a minute.
Yeah, it was quick.
And yeah, he was quartering to at 15 yards. And that's kind of the reason why I like a heavier setup, is because I know I can take that shot and I'm going to make it through bone. Right. So the way I've got it, if I were hunting somewhere where I'm taking longer shots, or if I was to say go antelope hunting or go mule deer hunting, I would probably go to a lighter setup to where the arrow's moving a little bit faster. But where I hunt, it's close quarters. The furthest shot I've even had the opportunity of taking out here has been 20 yards. Yeah. So I like having that heavier setup, because I can take shots that aren't perfect and still get away with it. Because like I said, I blew through. I missed the close shoulder, but I went through the offside shoulder. Right. So that's why I like a heavier arrow setup for that.
Yeah, for sure. So how big did the deer end up being?
So he ended up having 13 scoreable, 6 on the right, 7 on the left. Wow. Yeah. One of his on the right actually if he would have gone another year, probably would have ended up being a third beam.
Wow.
Because it was split off of the main beam between his brow tine and his first tine.
Gotcha.
So it probably would have actually ended up being a third beam if he'd have made it another year.
Wow.
If he hadn't walked out in front of me. But 13 scoreable, and he green scored at 120 and 4/8.
That's an
so
awesome.
4.5 inches shy of Pope and Young.
That's an awesome public land buck for sure. That's something you don't get very often.
No, that's the biggest buck I've ever shot.
Yeah.
Public, private, with anything. So the closest I'd come to it was a small 10-point about 5 years ago. But that's the biggest buck I've ever shot. First public buck with a bow too.
Awesome, man. That is incredible. You pull him up in the boat. All your worries went away at that point. You can relax at that point.
Dude, I was grinning from ear to ear. I mean, like, he said, as soon as he gets up in the boat, I just start laughing. I'm like, holy crap! Like, this actually, because I missed a bigger buck 2 days before.
Oh, no kidding.
I had missed. I had a chance to go out for like an hour and a half, and so I just booked it to one of the ground blinds that we've got set up out there. And I missed one shot right over his back at 20. And he was actually bigger than the one I had shot. But that one, I'm pretty sure I missed him at 18 yards to my left, and he just did a half circle, and he walked in front of the blind at 5 yards. And I let him walk because I didn't know it was the same buck. I let him walk at 5 yards because I thought I shot this one over here, because come to find out that whenever you hit a locust tree that's 25 yards away, it sounds the same as if you hit a deer's shoulder at 18.
Wow. That's funny.
But it was definitely an adventure last weekend.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, I'm stoked that you got him. It's we were following your journey from the team page, because as you mentioned, you posted on our group that you'd shot a buck, and were kind of giving us some updates on your progress as you were tracking him. And man, I know the feeling. I know it even more actually since you killed yours. I had my own experience too, where I'm dealing with similar circumstance with a buck, and that's actually going to be a different podcast, so I'm not going to get into that on this one. But I was very relieved when you sent that water pic, and or the deer floating at least, and then that picture of you with your feet up in the boat and that deer laying there in front of you that's what we want to see right there. That's perfect.
I think I was more stressed out whenever I saw the deer laying in the river than I was whenever I was trying to sleep Saturday night, knowing I bumped him again.
Yeah, you're like, is this adventure ever going to end? I just want this deer.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, I don't even care. I just want the deer.
Well, that's awesome.
But it was, definitely a story that I'm going to be able to tell for a long time.
Yeah, one for the books, a little public land mayhem for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up our recording time, man, I have some questions I like to ask every newcomer on our podcast. Since this is your first time joining us, I wanna hit you with a couple questions here real quick. The first one being, and I'm always curious to hear, what is, aside from the story that you just told, it may rank up there, it may not, but what is one of your favorite hunting memories to date, and tell us about it.
I got a lot of them.
A lot of people do, and I kind of hit you out of the blue there with it, so sorry about that. But
oh, you're good. I don't know. A lot of them that stick out are going dove hunting with my dad whenever I was a kid. He passed away whenever I was 12, so I never got to deer hunt with him, but we did a lot of dove hunting whenever I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I remember he would always give me an opportunity, because I wasn't old enough to carry a shotgun, so I'd carry my BB gun with me. he'd always give me an opportunity to shoot any of them that are sitting in the tree until he got too impatient. If he had to tell me 5 times it's right there, he would just be like, all right, I'll show you. Bam.
Yeah.
And so one of those that I vividly remember, we were hunting not far from our house, and one landed in a tree behind us, and he's trying to tell me where it's at, and I can't see it. I'm like probably 8 or 9 years old, and I can't see it. And finally he's like, here, I'll show you. And he steps on a branch on the ground, snaps it, dove takes off, and he shoots it.
That's awesome.
So that's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah. I love it. It seems like a majority of the ones we get are family related, you know, either guys remember back hunting with their dad or them taking their son or daughter hunting for the first time. I love that those are often favorite memories. It's cool.
Yeah, that one's up there with taking my son shooting his first deer 2 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
We were sitting in a double ladder stand on a buddy of mine's 5 acres. We were 60 yards from his back door, and it's one of those setups that he's got that it's just the deer come into his backyard. I'm sitting in the tree stand, and I get a text, and I look down, and it's from him. There's 6 deer in the backyard that we obviously can't shoot because they're in the backyard in a rifle hunt.
Wrong way.
I'm sure he didn't want a 5.56 going through his living room.
No.
But about 20 minutes later, a group of does starts coming up the hill, and we're watching the ones in the backyard, and I slowly turn and see the ones coming at us, and my son's still turned around looking, and I slowly turn, I look, and I see, and they're coming at us, and I said, don't move, but slowly turn around because there's deer coming to us. And he's sitting like this, looking at the ones in the backyard, and as soon as I say slowly turn, he's like, and of course the lead doe just looks right at him, and I'm like, all right, just get on the gun, because she's not going anywhere. I'm like, all right, just get on the gun, just put it right at the base of that white patch and pull the trigger. And he shot her, and hind end went down. She did a backflip down the hill and didn't go any further.
Wow, that's
and
awesome.
I think I was more excited than he was.
Yep. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. Well, last question I got for you, and another one I love hearing the different answers on. What are a couple of your top bucket list hunts right now that you haven't gotten to do yet?
Buffalo with a trad bow.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I've got a buddy of mine. I don't know if you saw the story of the guy that shot the black bear here in Oklahoma with the self bow and stone points and.
No, I don't guess I did. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah. So that's a buddy of mine named Caleb Flies. He's as far as we know, the first person to actually kill a black bear in Oklahoma with a primitive setup since a primitive setup was actually modern. Right. So he's the first to kill a black bear, first recorded person, I think, to kill a black bear with a stone point in Oklahoma. So yeah, I'd want to have him help me make a setup like that with an Osage self bow, stone points, and go kill a buffalo. That would be insane. That's my number one bucket list, and below that's Cape Buffalo with a bow. Wow. Both of those would be incredible, man. That's really cool, that primitive setup. I like that. Yeah. I don't think I'll limit the Cape Buffalo to a trad setup. I think I might do a compound on that. Yeah. But, yeah, people give me weird looks all the time because I'm one of those guys that I see no point in jumping out of a perfectly good airplane or jumping off a cliff with a rubber band attached to my ankle. But my adrenaline, I'll stand 5 yards away from Black Death with nothing but a stick and a string. And that's the kind of adrenaline rush I like to have. I know. I've gotten that. I'm very similar. I've gotten the same question. Like, you won't go skydiving, but you'll go do that. I'm like, yeah, exactly. I will. It's like, you won't jump out of a plane with a pretty high success rate, but you'll stand 5 feet from a grizzly bear with a bow and arrow. Yeah. Yeah.
My fate's in my hands, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just Tim Wells it up and shoot it right between the eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Tanner, that's awesome, man, and I really appreciate you coming on our podcast to tell us about your public land story. That's one for the books for sure, and I appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. We'll get you back on here sometime in the near future for sure, but appreciate you.
All right, sounds good.
For our listeners, thank you all for listening to another podcast. If you haven't already, hit up all the social media sites, platforms, apps, all that kind of stuff, and follow Fall Obsession. We're very active on all those. FallObsession.com is the hub. Head to the website, check it out, pick you up some merch. We got all sorts of cool content on there for you guys. And don't forget to watch our various shows and listen to the podcast streaming now on Carbon TV. So hit us up on there as well. Thank you all for listening. We're back again next week for another episode, and I will catch you guys then.